So if you want to get away from Hockey Meltdown,
yes,
go directly to the Vancouver Art Gallery.
There's some extraordinary things there.
Escape.
Yes.
Why not? Kurt Seligman, tell me about him.
Well, Kurt Seligman is really interesting for BC particularly, because one of the things we tried to do in this show is look at how the Surrealists were interested in First Nations art. And Seligman came to British Columbia in the 1930s, working for the Musée de l'Homme in Paris, now the Musée Quai Branly, and to buy First Nations art to take away to Paris. Not something we would recommend these days.
No, not anymore.
But in those days, they really genuinely thought they were bringing an extraordinary, and so he took a whole series of photographs of First Nations sites in the 1930s, which are now in the Musée Quai Branly, and this is the first time in the world these have ever been shown. How
fabulous! Black and white.
Black and white, yeah.
Interesting history too, very. But you know the spirit in a native mask and the feeling in a longhouse and all of that you can see.
Oh yeah, well, I mean Breton, for example, I mean had an extremely important kwakwakawak head dress, and I mean he had it at the end of his life, and he apparently stared at it every day for several hours to get something of the quality of the spiritual quality of the work.
I'm sure there's an interesting feeling in the gallery with all of this work in one place. Okay, now to my nemesis, Juan Miro, him. Well, the Shooting Star.
Shooting Star is a wonderful little painting that belongs to the National Gallery in Washington, and it's as you can see, there is a sense of a human figure there, but it's a human figure with a big head and tiny little hands and so on. But a human figure unlike any human figure you've ever seen before. They were willing to distort, they were willing to change things, and they were willing to invent the way.
Right? Is that oil? Is it oil
yes,
on canvas?
It's an oil on canvas.
It's an oil on canvas.
Yes.
I've seen so much Miro. Now that I know he's a guy.
And actually, the show actually is named after him, actually, The Color of My Dreams, after one of his paintings, which is called Photo. Ceci, c'est le couleur de mes rêves, The Color of My Dreams. And the color of his dreams, the color of his dreams is blue.
Really?
Yes.
Well, who knew? Enrico Donati.
Enrico Donati, yes, he was of Italian descent, but he lived in the United States. And during the Second World War, a whole bunch of surrealists came to New York because, of course, as exile from Paris. And Donati was one of the leading figures in the, and you can see there's this completely strange idea of this is a sculpture rather than an object, because he didn't use something that pre-existed. He created this, but this sense of this the eyes that suddenly appear in the fist. Donati was also a huge collector of First Nations masks, and we have some of the masks that belong to Donati in the exhibition.
How great. Giacometti?
Yes, Giacometti, and particularly early in his career, although eventually Giacometti was sort of sent out of the Surrealist movement by Breton because he did something that Breton didn't like.
Really?
Yes.
Do we know what?
Well,
Can we talk about it on television?
I think it's mostly along the lines of he didn't follow Breton's line as to how you should do your
because why didn't you or I buy a Giacometti is the question. If we had,
you'd be very wealthy.
We'd be retired. Yes. Or a Salvador Dali, for that matter. So the totem, this is a Seligman again, the fallen totem pole.
Right.
About 32, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Well, his trip to British Columbia was revelatory for him, and it really fundamentally changed the way he made his art. I mean, there's this image of the totem, which I mean is something that began to appear, and affect his paintings later on, because he's also a very important painter.
So that is what it is.
That is what it is.
It is the fallen totem pole, and of course we saw the lobster telephone, and there's a Max Ernst in.
There's many Max Ernst in the show. There are many Giacomettis.
Tell me about Max Ernst.
Well, he was a guy who was married for a long time to Peggy Guggenheim, and as a consequence, he was able to become a very great collector of Northwest Coast objects and primitive objects. And Peggy Guggenheim used to be driven insane by the fact he loved this particular dealer in New York. He would just regularly go there and buy First Nations objects. Right. And he also invented a form of making art called decalomania, where basically you rub paint or ink onto a surface, and you put a piece of paper on it, and then you rip it off. Oh. And then if you like the image, you keep it. And if you don't like the image, you just throw it away and try again.
Sure. What about film? Because I know they worked in film,
Yes, they did. Yes. I mean, Buñuel and Dali made a very, very famous film called Un Chien Andalou. But they also loved film like Nosferatu by Murnau, by comic film. They loved Charlie Chaplin.
Betty Boop.
Betty Boop, yes. Because all this filmmaking
Buster Keaton, I
Buster
bet.
Keaton, absolutely. Was coming up, as they were developing, film was becoming firmly embedded. And the other thing about film at that time is film wasn't about the real world. It was about an imagined world. I mean, a world that you couldn't actually live in.
Yes. Well, congratulations for putting this all together. That's a big event.
Yes, and you have until September 25th to see it.
How great.
It's only in Vancouver.
I'll get there sometime this week. I have to.
Okay.
Because we have to escape a little bit.
Yes.
In case we're shedding hockey tears. I don't think we will be.
I hope not.
Did you watch?
Yes.
Okay. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Thom, The Color of My Dreams, The Surrealist Revolution in Art, May 28th started to September 25th, and you had a big soiree at Inform,
yes.
right, on the roof? I bet that was great. I bet my table was there.
Yes.
See?